Good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the January 20, 2022, I said that right, Zoning Hearing Board meeting. I would like to first invite everyone to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. This being our first meeting of the year, we have a little administrative housekeeping that we need to take care of. I thank you for your patience as we go through a couple of these items. First is the need to elect a chair of the Zoning Hearing Board, and I would nominate George Nagel. Is there a second? Are there any other nominees for chair? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? We have a chair. I guess you have to take it. You have to take it from here. Under delegated authority from the new chair of the Zoning Hearing Board, lawyers in the room, we need a vice chair, and would someone like to make a nomination for vice chair? Mr. Weitzman has been nominated. Is there a second? Ms. Foreman seconds. Are there any other nominees for vice chair? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Not opposed. Mr. Weitzman is elected vice chair. Now I am just handing it over to you, George. Thanks.
That works. Yes. First, I'd like to say a big thanks to John Riley. He was our chair for the last 2 years. It's usually a one-year term, but we were able to persuade him. 3 years. Boy, time flies. Well, again, terrific job, and you really handled this situation very well for 3 years, and let's hear it for him. Okay, one more piece of business. We have to adopt our rules of procedure for the Zoning Hearing Board, and these are the rules that are attached to your application, and they are, it's not statutory, it's just our agreed upon rules, and we have to adopt them every year. And I make a motion to adopt the rules as stated with one amendment, and that is the provision regarding the number of board members. Currently says 5 members and 1 alternate. I'm proposing to change that language to say 5 members and 2 alternates. Now I'll make that as a motion.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor of approving the rules of procedure with the amendment proposed, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? It passes unanimously. How many we got? One? We got 5 people voting. Right, got it. Oh, I'm sorry, one other piece of business. We need to appoint a solicitor for the year for the Zoning Hearing Board, and anyone want to make a nomination?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that Constantine Economides be appointed solicitor for the Zoning Hearing Board.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Seeing none? Congratulations, Gus.
Thank you, board members. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now to the agenda. There was one switch in the agenda. Appeal number 3120 has asked to be moved to the first appeal of the evening because of some scheduling difficulties with their expert, and I believe the parties in Appeal 3116 have agreed to that change. So we will proceed with appeal number 3120. The applicant, Mozzarella LLC, doing business as Alessandro's Wood-Fired Italian Bar, property located at 133 North Wayne Avenue in Zone Wayne Business Overlay District. Applicant seeks a variance from Section 280-53.12 of the code in regards to the parking requirement in the Wayne Business Overlay District, or in the alternative, such other relief consistent with the exhibits and testimony presented at the zoning hearing board. Proceed.
Thank you. Nick Keneally, representing the applicant. I'd like to thank George and Jim both for agreeing to move us. Frank Tavani, our expert on this matter, has an obligation that he has to leave for early. So I'll actually go a little bit out of order with our witnesses too. I'll give a brief overview so the board is familiar with what we're asking for, and I'll call Frank as the first witness, and then I'll call the owners as the follow-up witnesses. This is Alessandro's restaurant. I think you're probably all familiar with it. It's on the corner of North Wayne Avenue and Station Road, immediately across the street immediately across North Wayne Avenue from the Great American Pub, and immediately across Station Road from the Wayne train station. Currently, it's been operated as a restaurant. It's been operated as a restaurant for a number of years now. I believe the former use may have been O'Brien's News Agency. Trying to think back that far. But it's a restaurant now. The second floor is currently fit out as a residential apartment. Proposal here is to fit out that second floor for additional seating. We'll be adding 44 seats. We anticipate 4 to 5 employees as a result of those additional seats. You'll hear testimony that it will have a limited menu, and the main purpose is because of the tight constraints in the restaurant. It will be used as a waiting area, as well as a craft cocktail place that people go to either before or after dinner, no matter where they're going to in Wayne, hopefully, to have what would be upscale type of cocktails. So the first witness we would call would be Frank Tavani. And first, I'd like to hand up a couple additional exhibits that you do not have in front of you. The first one is permission from the landlord, from Cheryl Talbot, who is the partner in Poplar Partners LP. And this is permission for the applicant to proceed with the application, and that's been marked as A14. And then I have 2 other exhibits. One, A15, is the CV for Mr. Tavani, and A16 is his report regarding parking.
Maybe that'll work.
Your side. So yeah, if he has an extra, just put it in there. If not, just do your own. I think he has it marked already. Yeah, great, thank you. Give him an extra one. Thanks.
Frank?
I do. It's Frank Tavani, T-A-V-A-N-I. And I'm not speaking into the microphone right now because it seems like, despite it being on, the battery indicating good charge. Oh, there we go.
Okay.
Someone help me. Thank you.
Fixed it.
One thing I could add before we speak to Frank, there's a quirk in the Radnor zoning ordinance regarding parking in the WBOD. 53.12 provides under A, on-street parking, where on-street metered parking currently exists, parking shall remain on-street to the maximum extent permissible or possible. The way that this board, actually through a decision previously, and the township interprets that means that if you don't have any current parking on site, then you're allowed, you don't need any relief for parking requirements. So in this instance, we have one, maybe two parking spaces in the rear of the building. And since we have those parking spaces on site, we're required to appear before this board and ask for a variance for the parking. And I know Kevin will confirm that that is the interpretation of the township. It is a quirk in our zoning code, and it is what it is. So that's why we're here.
In the rear is considered on-street parking?
The rear is considered, off-street parking.
Off-street parking.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
okay.
next provision is where off-street parking is provided, parking spaces shall be located in the rear, underneath the building, and comply with the requirements, which include restaurant, one space per three seating accommodations, plus one seat per two employees. So I was incorrect. It's actually, since they have off-street parking on site, they have to appear before this board. If they had no off-street parking, then they would not have had to appear before the board. But Frank, just quickly, I think you've seen Frank many times before. Frank, what's your profession?
I am a traffic engineer.
And you're a registered professional engineer in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania?
Yes, I have been continuously since 1999.
And you're also a registered professional traffic operations engineer, is that correct?
Yes,
I have marked as C15 your curriculum vitae. Is that an accurate description of your qualifications?
yes,
And are you also a member of the Institute of Traffic Engineers?
yes.
May I qualify Frank as an expert, please?
Without objection.
Thank you.
Frank, did you perform a parking study for this proposal to add 44 seats to the second floor of this restaurant?
Yes,
And is that proposal been marked as A16?
it has.
And can you describe your analysis regarding the parking needs generated by this use?
Certainly. A16 is made up of 8 pages, 3 pages of text, 3 pages of figures, and 2 pages of support material from others. It's dated January 19th, as council stipulated. I personally visited the site this past Friday and Saturday evening to make parking observations in the immediate area of Alessandro's. As you heard from council, the restaurant is located very close to the Wayne train station, and if you turn to page 4 of A16, you'll see a graphic depiction of what I'm sure you know very well. Figure 2 is a similar figure. Figure 3, which is page 6, shows you specifically the sub-areas that I polled those 2 evenings. They're broken down into sub-areas A, B, and C. A is the municipal lot immediately behind Alessandro's. B is on-street parking on both sides of Wayne Avenue, between West Avenue and Lancaster Avenue. And area C,
Excuse me, Frank, you might want to put the exhibits up on the screen. Can we do that? Three people watching on TV. Thank you. Yeah.
I think mine might look a little better.
It's better colored. Go ahead, yep. There you go, Frank. Why don't you use that and show A, B, C?
Thank you, council. Area A, again, is the municipal lot, which is basically behind the site. Area B is the on-street parking along Wayne Avenue between West and Lancaster. And Area C is on-street parking along Lancaster between Wayne and Luella.
So you did not even include the parking on West Avenue, correct?
That's correct. There is available on-street public parking along West Avenue as well, which is obviously very close to the site. And within a 5-minute walk of the site, there is also, as I'm sure the board is well familiar, the approximately 100-space municipal lot at the corner of South Bellevue Avenue and Lancaster Avenue near White Dog. That was also purposely excluded. These were the closest parking spaces, at least A and B were, and I just included Area C because that was also within a 5-minute walk of the site. And to be conservative, I left out what could have been areas D and E as just described. So specifically, this past Friday and Saturday night, I visited those areas from 6:30 to 8:30, both evenings, and made parking observations. And you may ask why I chose to focus on those times. And what I'm showing now is A16, page 7. This is from the ITE Parking Generation Manual. This is probably the best land use code which matches the application. It's called Quality Restaurant, and it's a little fuzzy on the screen, but what it shows in the first column is a time of day, and then in the next 2 columns, either a generic weekday or a Friday specifically, and a percentage of peak parking demand. And as I outlined, as you can see in a very thin rectangle, it's generally the 7 o'clock and 8 o'clock hours that are the busiest times of day for this particular land use code. The last page of A16 is a slightly different restaurant type, a fast casual restaurant, which this really isn't, but it's of some interest to note that it also has evening peaks around the same time, perhaps slightly earlier. It also has a peak around lunchtime, but Alessandro's is not open during those hours, so there was no purpose in making observations during those times of day. In fact, as you can see in the second paragraph of A16, Alessandro's is open 5 days a week from 5 to 9, and Friday and Saturday until 10 o'clock. My observations are summarized on page 2 of A16 in 2 tables. You can see I polled these sub-areas in 15-minute increments, starting at 6:30. Area B, which was Wayne Avenue on-street parking, is very highly subscribed. Those spaces, as I'm sure the board is aware, turn over with almost immediate frequency. So I could see that for most of the count, there was effectively no parking there, less than 5 spaces. Area C, I could see that there was a lot of available parking spaces. So it was only when it got to be about 25 or so that I got very specific. As you can see in table 2, 7:30, 7:45, 8 p.m., there were still at least 20 available spaces along Lancaster Avenue. And during those peak times, there were also at least 14 spaces available in Area A, which is the municipal lot behind Alessandro's. So essentially, as you can see in the last column of these 2 tables, no matter what time of day or day of week chosen, there were always at least 38 spaces available, again, in this very specific immediate area, excluding the SEPTA lot for obvious reasons, although it is very nearby, also excluding West Avenue and the Bellevue lot. If I included those, these numbers could have easily been over 100. But to be conservative, I focused just on those. And as I understand it, 16 spaces are required for the application. So knowing that, and knowing we have more than double that available at the busiest times of day, and knowing the conservative measures also employed, as I mentioned earlier, I believe the application will not have a parking problem.
Frank, within a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, do you have an opinion on the availability of parking in the immediate area for this proposed use?
I do.
And what is that opinion?
It will be sufficiently available to meet the needs of the applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not-
Any questions from board members? Okay. I don't believe I have any questions. So, thank you, Frank.
Thank you.
May Frank be excused?
Yes.
Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much.
Gary? Alex? Yes.
Alessandro Fiorello. Alessandro Fiorello, A-L-E-S-S-A-N-D-R-O. Alessandro Fiorello, F-I-O-R-E-L-L-O.
Gary DeSanto, G-A-R-Y-D-E-S-A-N-T-O.
Gary? What's your relationship to Alessandro's?
I'm the majority owner.
And your partner is,
My partner is Alessandro,
and,
also my wife.
okay, and Alex is the chef?
Alex is the chef operating partner, yep.
Where do you live?
I live at 40 Luella Court. 40 Luella Court, C2.
And you're right around the, or
Right
across the
behind
parking lot, yeah.
Right behind the restaurant, right.
Actually, you've lived in Radnor for a long time.
Been in Radnor for 15 years. We used to live over on Wooten Road.
When did you acquire your interest in Mozzarella Inc., doing business as Alessandro's?
February 7th of last year.
And as we mentioned, you're partners with Alex.
Correct.
How long has Alex been involved with the restaurant?
2.5 years.
Okay.
2.5 years.
And what type of cuisine are we talking about?
Italian.
I'm going to show you a couple exhibits. One I've marked as A2, and that's the deed to the property, and that's your understanding of the deed to the property, and it's owned by Poplar Partners, LP.
Yes.
And also, that lease for Mozzarella was assigned to you as a new owner of Mozzarella Inc., and that's been marked as A3.
Yes.
And also, we have marked, and I've handed up as A14, permission from Poplar Partners for you to proceed here this evening. Is that right?
Yes.
Going to show you a couple photographs, and perhaps I think the board's fully aware where we're located, but if you can describe where the restaurant is. Here is North Wayne Avenue, the train station. Alessandro's here, correct?
Correct, yes.
Pointing, and right across is the Wayne train station.
Correct.
And then across North Wayne is the American Pub, and the list of other businesses along North Wayne Avenue, right?
Correct.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as A5. And is this the front photo of Alessandro's?
Yes.
And that's a current photo. I mean, it would exist there today.
Correct. Still has the Christmas lights.
All right. And looking up top on the second floor, is that where you're intending to add the seating?
Yes.
And that window, actually, that area in the front, is that where the seating would be located?
Yes. We picked that because it's just a beautiful view of the street there.
Okay. And actually, so people would be able to sit up there, have a drink, or whatever, have small bites, and look out onto North Wayne Avenue.
Correct.
What's the need for the use? Why do you need to put seats up there?
Well, we found people coming to the restaurant specifically, well, even now during the week, it's crowded. We don't have any room for people to stand while other people are eating. So we thought it would be just a great idea to open up the upstairs for pre-dinner or even an after-dinner drink, not just for our restaurant, but for any of the restaurants along the street. Anyone wanted to come in, have a drink, small bite. Our kitchen isn't very big, so we don't anticipate having full meals up there, but maybe some boards or something that's pre-made. You could talk a little bit more about that. So I think there's a real need for it.
I'm showing a couple. First off, right now on the first floor, you're allowed 70 seats, I believe, correct?
Correct.
But you don't have 70 seats downstairs.
No, 60 seats, no.
And is there a reason why you only have 60?
Well, the number of occupants for downstairs was before they put the bar in, before I owned it. And when the bar came in, it took up more seating. So we're limited to 60 seats.
You don't have many seats at the bar, though, right?
5 seats.
Do you find that people sometimes prefer eating it at the bar?
Everyone wants a seat at the bar. The bar, very, very prime seats, yeah.
I'm going to show you A6, and you heard me mention during opening the rear of the building. Is this the rear of the building where I'm pointing to the
Yes.
right side, across from the train station? And the parking spots we're talking about are where this car right here is located, I guess, in that area. Is that right?
Correct. You can just about fit 2 cars there.
Now, A7, can you just describe A7 and what that represents? That's the side of the building, obviously.
That's the side of the building, SEPTA and Amtrak parking there. That's also the entrance to the second floor, right behind the SEPTA sign there.
So actually, you're not entering through the interior of the current restaurant. You're actually entering on the side here.
Correct.
And are you intending to change anything on the facade of the building?
No.
Now, A8, is this a photograph of a picture of the upstairs?
Yes.
And actually, the top part of that, that's the kitchen area that currently exists in that apartment.
Correct.
And then the bottom part, that's looking, the window that we described as the front facade that's looking out onto North Wayne Avenue?
Correct. But just to be clear, that kitchen isn't used as part of the restaurant now.
Right, yeah.
And won't be there with the renovations.
Going to show you what's been marked as A9. And A9 is a survey of the property, a site plan of the exterior of the property, is that right?
Yes.
And the area, again, you do have parking in the front that is metered parking, that's off-site technically.
Correct.
And then you have this area here that's 18.86 feet wide that is used for parking.
Could be used for parking, yes.
And-
And we
So-
need to get in and out of the back door, so a lot of times it's not parking, but it's parking.
But in any event, that's why we're here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to show you what's been marked as A10. And is this a proposed floor plan? Is this a proposed floor plan?
Yes,
So-
yes.
Now, this roof deck, you're not using this roof deck at all? right?
Not at all, no.
So we're talking about the interior and the front part here. This is the part facing North Wayne Avenue where it says 44 seats, 5 staff. And this is the area where the seating would be.
Correct, yes.
And can you just describe the rest of how the rest of it is being used? You said there's no restaurant up here of any kind,
No.
or any cooking facilities.
No cooking, just 2 unisex bathrooms, storage, and we'd love to be able to use some of that as wine storage, which we have a problem with right now, just because we have limited space in the restaurant. And then all the guests would be up in the front of the building.
Showing you what's been marked as A11. And is this a seating chart that you're contemplating?
Yes,
Again, as we said, the seating up front here, and it looks like you have a little service bar here, right?
correct, yes.
Now, will you possibly put maybe a little larger bar there, but you still would not exceed 44 seats? Could you have some seating at the bar?
Not the way it's currently designed. We did contemplate putting a bar to this wall here, where we'd lose 8 seats. We'd probably gain about 5 or 6 back. So net, there won't be any more than 44 seats.
Right, okay. The only other exhibit that I have, there was an elevation that I wanted to show. And actually, that's marked as A12. And the one that we're talking about at the top, the north elevation, and can you just describe how people will access it and for the side there for entry?
Right, so we thought about this a lot. We thought about putting steps inside the restaurant to lead upstairs, but not only was it going to take up so much space in the restaurant, it was thought that it would be disruptive to the patrons as they were dining. We just thought it made more sense to use the existing door on the outside to have people access the upstairs for cocktails and light bites.
The only other, actually, why don't we just hear a little bit from Alex, since he's been standing there next to you, if
Okay.
you want to hand it to Alex. Alex, how long you been at this location now?
2.5 years.
All right, and what's your background?
My whole family's just been in the business my whole life, and I worked in New York at my grandfather's pizzeria, worked in my father's restaurant in Westchester,
Okay. And currently you're you look like this tonight because you're
working.
working
Yes.
and going right back to the restaurant, right?
Yes.
Okay. And do you agree with everything that Gary said regarding what the proposed use is going to be?
Yes.
The only other exhibit that I have is 813, and this is actually relatively old. I went back through some real old zoning files that I had, and 813 represents prior relief granted by this board. Now, granted, most of this relief was before the WBOD, because now, as I mentioned, if there's no on-site parking, they do not have to appear before the zoning hearing board. But these were a list of cases that I was familiar with, at least mainly in the Wayne area. There was a couple here, I believe, that may have been in Rosemont or in Garrett Hill, for which relief was granted. So that's all I would have. I would just request exhibits be made part of the record, please.
Any questions from the board or witnesses?
Yeah, I have a question. Is there a proposed elevator to access the second floor?
No.
Okay. And, okay. So I think that probably handles the second. The roof deck is there, but at least with respect to this application, there's no intention to use that.
No plans for the roof deck, correct.
Okay.
Anyone else have questions? Alex, I would approve you as an expert just based on the shirt alone. Just one question. I suppose the expectation or hope is that you'll have increased traffic with this new space upstairs, the additional business.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What's the expectation? Do you have any idea what it might be, or?
I think it would be full most nights that we're open.
Okay.
Certainly Thursday, Friday, and Saturday.
All right. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else?
That's all I have, just as I mentioned, if the exhibits be made part of the record,
Okay.
please.
So be it. Any public comment on this application? Okay. Seeing none. Do I have a motion from anyone from the board?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the variance under Section 280-5312 of the code in regards to the parking requirement, all in accordance with the testimony.
Is there a second?
A second.
Okay, board discussion. Yeah, I would say this is definitely a quirk in our code, and it kind of enforcing it really wouldn't make a lot of sense here, in my opinion. So to have a vote, all in favor of the motion to approve the application, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
And good luck with your project. Okay, the next item, this is continuing from the November 18th meeting. There was a continuance granted at the December 16th meeting, appeal number 3116. I think first piece of order on this appeal, we do have a request for party status for a group. Is Jim Greenfield here?
Mr. Chairman, I did
is he
see
here?
him earlier. I believe he may be.
Oh, okay. Jim, you've been called.
We need a bell or something in the anteroom.
Good evening.
Good evening. Jim Greenfield for the objectors. Wanted to enter my appearance and also move that the individuals listed in our memorandum be recognized as parties to this matter. They're all proximate neighbors of the property.
Okay. Are they all here tonight?
They're not all here tonight.
Okay. All right, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, and all the persons you're representing are neighbors?
Yes.
Approximate neighbors?
They're all proximate neighbors within Laurier.
Got it. George, is there any objection to these parties being a party to the hearing?
Good evening, George Brosman. I wanted to ask Mr. Greenfield who is here and who is not here, because there were certain individuals I might have wanted to ask some questions to. Could you tell us who is available?
Can everyone I'm representing who's here, please raise your hand?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And
Adams, Goldberg,
1,
Rubin.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, there are 8 couples, I guess, right?
Yes,
Yes.
8 households, yes. Yes.
Could I just have one minute? I just wanted to object. I'm sorry, I wanted to object to the families that are not here. I did have some questions for them.
Who's not here?
Who's not here?
Who's not here?
My apologies. Some of the board members have not gotten a memorandum, so I'm looking at it for the first time.
Oh,
So
has not everybody seen the memorandum?
I have seen it.
You've seen it?
I have seen it.
Here's your list, Jim. You said Sajid Ahmad and Anela Khan at 300
Yeah,
West
they're, I
Laurier.
don't think they're here. The Ilsons are not here. I think everybody else is represented.
I wouldn't object to anybody else, but those individuals I would object to.
Jim, you are representing to us that you have power of attorney for these individuals. You're representing them here tonight
Yeah,
for
they-
party status?
They have all signed a representation letter, yes.
Okay. We're going to approve all of them as parties in interest for the hearing.
Okay, thank you. How are we going to proceed?
We're going to proceed with a continuation of the case. I will allow you to cross-examine only the witnesses who were called tonight, not to recall any witnesses that were called in the last meeting. I mean, you're a little late to the game, but it's going to start here. We're not going to go back and rehash old evidence.
Okay, that's certainly acceptable to us.
So I'll give you, you'll respond to his case as he makes it. But I think we'll start with him continuing his case, with the
Okay.
applicant continuing his case.
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And George, I'd just like to mention, you know, we're pretty far into this now. We had almost 3 hours 2 months ago. So in the interest of time and the fact that we have an applicant after this case, I would ask you to be as efficient as possible. And we're limiting the testimony tonight to whatever evidence you were not able to present last time because you ran out of time, or if there's any new facts. And to do that in a very efficient manner.
I'll try to go through.
Again,
it.
we're almost 3 hours into this. I don't think you need a lot more time on this.
Okay, understood.
Okay, thanks.
What I will tell you is, and I think you received a letter that I will put in the record, we did hear concerns last time about the encroachment into the setback. So we did withdraw that variance request, and we do have revised plans to show that. So we'll have to go over those plans. We're also able to meet with Mr. Kachansky, and we received a determination from him as to which slopes were exempt and which were not. So we wanted to go over that. And the witness that we did not reach last time was Joe Blandy, the landscape architect. But in order to go over the plans, I will have to call Dave Fiorello, the engineer, back, and then I was going to call Larry Kimmel. But hearing your pronouncement now, I don't think we need to recall him. So I'll just go right to David Fiorello, if that is okay.
Yeah, and if you can limit it to just the differences between what we saw last time and what we're seeing now. We know where the slopes were. We don't have to rehash that.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
and you remember the slopes and what they look like?
I have all the pictures right here.
Okay.
Yes, why don't we? That'll be fine.
Where did Jim go? I didn't recognize you. David, you heard me mention that we had revised the plan. You have up here, what we're going to have is A19. Is this the revised plan set? Yes, it is. I have smaller copies. Shall I hand them out? Oh, sorry. And I should also note, I have an extra copy. I had sent a letter. I will submit that. It's A18. It was the letter withdrawing the variance relief for the setback. David, with regard to Exhibit A19, will this plan replace our prior plan, A8?
Yes.
And you heard Mr. Nagel. Can you go over the changes that were made to this plan since the last time?
The change involved the rotation of the building to place the rear of the building parallel with the rear property line, so it sits inside the perimeter setback. So the building, where it had been rotated before on the footprint of the existing tennis court, we rotated it adjacent to the building, parallel with the setback line, and within the building envelope.
And you obviously heard some concerns from some of the neighbors last time. Did Mr. Kimmel direct you to take a look at some of the other issues, and did you make other changes?
In our changes in reorienting the building, we actually lowered the floor elevation of the building by 4.5 feet to bring the elevation, the ground elevation down. We pulled the driveway further away from the northern property line, running it parallel with the building, which pulls it further away from the property line. We had proposed previously a very high, I would call a high retaining wall, which was on the order of 8 to 9 feet high in certain places. Lowering the building allow us to reduce the height of the retaining wall, so we have a maximum of 4-foot high retaining wall along the driveway. Generally, they're the major changes that involved with reorientation of the building, and again, trying to reduce some of the impact on the slopes.
Now, when we had thought about this before, we had thought that if we pulled it out of the setback, it might cause the building to go closer to the Adams property. Did that turn out to be the case?
No, actually, the prior plan showed the proximity to the corner of the building to the property line of just about 78 feet. We're now 79 feet away. So the proximity, the closeness of the building has really been expanded, if you will, away from the property line by another foot.
Now, with the removal of the setback relief, is the proposed structure and the related improvements for the project by right with regard to the applicable requirements of the R1 Residence District and the applicable requirements for density modification?
Yes, I believe it is.
And can we, since the building shifted, can you go over what the setbacks are for all the adjoining, from all of the adjoining lots and from Mill Road?
From the lot to the east, I guess that's lot 13 to 200 West Laurier. We're 390 feet away from the property line with the building addition. From the Adams property at 329 West Laurier, we're 79.75 feet. From the Mullen property at 324 West Laurier, we're 90 feet. And from Mill Road, we're 193 feet.
On the Adams property, that 79 feet is the building or the driveway?
The building.
The building.
And with regard to the Adams property, you spoke about the distance from the building to the property line. Do you have an estimate of how far the building would be from the Adams residence, the building on the Adams property?
The building on the Adams property is sort of skewed relative to this. We're on the order of 170 feet or so away from the actual building with this addition.
Now, the setbacks from the property line for the building, do these significantly exceed the zoning requirements for setbacks?
The zoning requirements under the density modification for this property was 40 feet between buildings. So again, with the 170 give or take distance that we are away, yes, we're far in excess of the requirement.
And does the project still comply with the applicable building coverage requirements?
Yes. Building coverage requirement in this district is a maximum of 20%. We are, if I recall, 12.3% building coverage.
So in terms of size, the building is well within the permitted size, is that correct?
Yes.
Do the revised plans still confirm that no relief is being sought from the height limit for this building?
Yes.
And do the revised plans still comply with the applicable impervious cover limits for the property?
Yes, it does.
And what is required and what is proposed?
The maximum impervious allowed under the code is 27%. This plan shows 20.99%, just shy of 21%.
And last time you spoke about stormwater management. Will this project still have stormwater management?
It is a requirement that we go and abide by all the rules and regulations of the stormwater management ordinance, yes.
And how will the stormwater management that's provided compare to what's there today?
Right now, there is actually no stormwater
I'm sorry,
management.
is it any different from the management as it was described in the last hearing?
No different.
Because again, I think we're trying to focus on differences.
Gotcha. Okay, then moving on to steep slopes. Have you updated the plans with regard to the steep slopes?
Yes, we did.
And since the last hearing, did you participate in a meeting, I believe it was on December 20, 2021, with myself and the zoning officer, Kevin Kachansky, to review the prior grading permit plans for the property and to discuss which slopes would be exempt from the township slope regulations?
Yes, I was there.
After that meeting, did you submit plans to Kevin to receive that determination?
Yes, I did.
And after the meeting, did you receive an email determination from Mr. Kachansky?
Mr. Kuchansky, in his email, yes, we received that he was in agreement with what we had shown on the plans.
And I'm going to put in the record the email, Kevin, if you don't mind, 828. I went a little out of order. Do you have 820 there?
Is that the one with the numbers on it?
Oh, is that already 820?
Yeah, that's already
Oh, okay. We were already using 820. I'm going to hand out the smaller copies to Mr. Greenfield and the board. So last time we had a plan that you numbered the slope exhibits. Is this the new version?
This is the
Or
updated version, yes.
The slope areas, I mean. This is the updated version of that, and we've called that A20.
Yes.
So this plan would replace the old exhibit A10, is that right?
Yes, sir.
On this plan, which of the areas did Mr. Kachansky determine that would be exempt?
Shown on the plan in the areas of pink, which is Area 5A and Area 5A and Area 6.
And so we're only seeking relief for areas 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5B?
Correct.
And as before, no disturbance for area 7?
Correct.
With the changes to the plans, did the disturbance levels to the areas in question, the regulated areas, change?
The area of Area 1, because of our determination, increased in size. Area 6 was reduced in size. With the reduction of the height of the retaining wall, we have a little bit more grading in Area 1 than we had before. But generally, we're on the same level of disturbance as we were with the previous plan.
And I've handed out A21, Exhibit A21. Is this a summary of the areas of steep slope that are not exempt?
Yes.
And they have the sizes of the areas and the disturbed area?
Yes.
The areas themselves generally didn't change, correct?
The only difference was the difference between Area 1 and Area 6. Our previous determination had Area 6 a little bit larger than Area 1. Consultation with Kevin Kachansky, we reduced the size of Area 6 and increased the size of Area 1.
Right, okay. And you have some of the areas colored in green, area 4 and 5B. What does that signify?
Those areas were areas that were not previously delineated as steep slopes on the original grading permit. However, our as-built survey showed that these areas, after construction, were disturbed, and steep slopes were created as a result of some of the construction work during the construction of the house itself. The original grading permit showed a boulder wall behind the house, which is on here, but showed a higher wall than what was actually constructed. So the contractor, when building the wall, did not build the wall as high, but sloped the ground behind the wall to avoid that larger, taller wall. Consequently, in creating that grading to the wall, those areas are steeper now than 20%. They were graded 3 to 1, pretty much in accordance with the grading ordinance. So they are technically now defined as steep slopes.
And all of your testimony that you gave before on the hardship and the variance standards and the impacts, the intent of the steep slope, would all that testimony be the same as it was the last time?
Yes.
And all of the testimony, now strike that. I think I've hit the new things. Have I missed anything new?
I think you had it all.
That would be all the new information from Mr. Fiorello.
Okay. Questions from the board?
Just a quick one. The delineation between green and purple, are you asking for something different between the two? I'm trying, Mr. Brosman,
I could
you
answer
still want a
that.
variance on both, on all?
There are variances on both. What we wanted, I know the board, does believe that man-made slopes need variance relief. That's why we're here. But we did have testimony last time that, Mr. Fiorello believes they're man-made. We believe that's a factor that you consider. So by coloring them, we were just showing that 4 and 5B we think were created when the house was built, even though they weren't on the plans that Mr. Kachansky reviewed. They were a field adjustment. And as Mr. Fiorello testified previously, areas 1, 2, and 3, we believe were man-made but created much earlier in time, because you'll recall the testimony was that the original lighted tennis court that's there now, that was there before the Kimmel residence was built. That had been an accessory to the main house that's now on Lot 13. So we do need relief from all of the areas. We were just, putting more information about, when they were created. Yep.
Any questions? So I had a question on A20, just so I'm clear. In section number 1, this is where the driveway is coming up through, right?
Yes.
And with your new plan, just by looking at it, it looks like there's less intrusion into the steep slopes?
There's less
Or is that-
intrusion with the physical features. However, we are grading in front of the retaining wall, so there is disturbance of the steep slopes associated with the grading associated with the improvements.
Okay, but it's been decreased since the previous plan. Is that fair to say, or?
The extent of the grading has been decreased, but the area itself has grown a little bit, so,
Okay.
I'm not sure how to differentiate between the two.
I see.
The driveway is moved further
the
from
dri-
the Adams property, correct?
Yes.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
Yes.
So in that regard, it's probably less intrusion on area 1 for the driveway, correct?
Yes.
Okay. If no questions from the board, Jim, would you like to cross-examine?
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Mr. Fiorello, am I correct that under the new plan, the footprint of the sports structure remains at 11,852 square feet?
That is what is shown on our plan, yes.
And that's about triple the size of the existing dwelling, right?
Yes, close to that.
What's the height of the building going to be?
The height of the building, from my understanding from the architect, meets all the height requirements of the zoning code.
Meaning that it will be 35 feet or less? As calculated under code?
Yes, as calculated under code.
Right. Have you seen any renderings of what this building's going to look like?
No, I have not.
Regarding the calculations of steep slope disturbance in Exhibit A21, the aggregate of steep slopes that are going to be disturbed if this project is built is 8,532 square feet, correct?
Yes,
So that's about 1/5 of an acre, approximately.
approximately, yes.
Have you looked at any possible development schemes where the scope of this development is decreased in order to minimize the disruption of steep slopes?
We did so with this layout. I mean, I have no control over the building. The building has been designed by others. By reorienting the building, we've reduced some of the disturbance, but no other alternates have been looked at.
Is it fair to say that if the size of the sports structure was reduced, that it would at least reduce the disturbance of steep slopes?
Depends on how it would be reduced, but there is a possibility.
Okay, so if the sports structure, for example, remained against the setback line at the south end of the property, but was reduced in size and the driveway coming to the parking lot was moved further south, that would in fact reduce the disturbance of steep slopes, would it not?
If the building was shrunk in that manner, yes, but I'm not sure you would have the facility that would be desired as a result of that.
Well, it would be a lesser facility, but in that instance, you would have less steep slope disturbance, correct?
But again, you wouldn't have a sports court that I'm assuming meets all the regulations for size.
So you're assuming that this structure is designed at this size to meet the minimum requirements for a tennis court?
It's my understanding, yes.
Isn't it correct that you basically need 7,200 square feet for a tennis court?
For an open tennis court, I believe so, yes.
Yes, and in this instance, you have a structure that's nearly 12,000 square feet, correct?
I have no responsibility for the design. I can't tell you everything that went into it.
Right. You had indicated, I think last time, and I believe affirmed tonight, that stormwater management would be handled by connecting to the existing Laurier stormwater management system, right?
I mentioned, said tonight that our system would be designed in accordance with the township requirements. The current requirements now are more stricter than they were when the development was built, so we have to comply with current standards.
Does that mean that a basin would be built on the property to manage stormwater?
That's the intent, yes.
That's the intent. And where would that basin be placed?
It would most likely be an underground system, probably underneath the parking lot, an area outside the building.
Okay. With with adequate volume to handle 100-year storm coming off the improvements?
That is the requirement of the township ordinance, yes.
That's all I have for Mr. Fiorello.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fiorello. Okay, George, do you have anything else? Okay.
You can leave that there. I'm going to have my landscape architect, and in response to some of the questions that Jim had, I may call the architect for the project who could address some of the things as to the
Okay.
size. But I think I'll go ahead and call Joe Blandy, please. I'm going to hand out Mr. Blandy's CV. Joe, would you please describe your professional and educational background?
Sure. I'm president and owner of Stony Bank Nurseries in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. Sorry. I'm the president and owner of Stony Bank Nurseries in Glen Mills, Pennsylvania. We're a residential landscape design construction firm. We specialize in higher-end residential landscape design. Graduate of Temple University, licensed landscape architect in Pennsylvania and Delaware, 42-year exhibitor in the Philadelphia Flower Show, and current board member on the Jenkins Arboretum.
And you're the Kimmel's landscape architect for this project?
I am.
And you're generally familiar with the property?
Yes.
Have you prepared landscape plans for this project?
Yes, we have.
And I handed out Exhibit A23. Can you describe what this is to the board?
Yes, this is our current conceptual landscape plan for the property. We're looking at design development for the entire site, which includes proposed new swimming pool, outdoor patio spaces, and overall planting and softening of the proposed improvements.
And particularly with the landscaping around the tennis court structure, could you describe your plan for that and how you conceive that?
Yeah, what we were looking at primarily is, of course, addressing screening issues was a very high priority for our work here. And what we're doing is looking at it as a layered design. So we have in essence, the first layer of screening beginning right along the front foundation of the building with larger evergreen trees to help soften it. Then continuing across the entrance lane here, we have a secondary, very heavily vegetated buffer there, again with large evergreens mixed with deciduous and ornamental plantings. And then a third layer being down along the property line adjacent to Lot 22, extending the existing evergreen screen there and extending it up to further block views.
And have you given consideration to the types of plants that will be used here?
Yes, we have. We are primarily focusing on 3 species of evergreen trees as the main varieties to achieve the desired screening effects. We're looking at Cryptomeria japonica radicans, Picea abies, which is a Norway spruce, and Thuya green giant, which is the green giant arborvitae. These species were selected for their rapid rate of growth as well as their increased deer resistance as being a high priority.
And while you were speaking, I handed out a A28. Is that just a list of these trees that you mentioned?
Yes, along with some...
A24.
I'm sorry, A24. Thank you.
Yes, along with some other species that may be mixed in, but we would be focusing primarily on the 3 species I just described for a bulk of the evergreen blockage.
And we're going to show them in a moment. Have you created some perspectives from a couple of views of what you would see or what a person would see from these views?
Yes, we have. We worked with the architects on these perspectives.
And I'm first going to hand out what we're calling Exhibit A25A and A25B. While I'm handing those out, if you don't mind, could you, and there's going to be another 2 exhibits after this, could you explain, how you created these, what information you used, and how they were created, and how you know they're relatively accurate?
Sure. What we're looking at here is a view from the cul-de-sac up towards, a view from the cul-de-sac at the bottom of the Kimmel's driveway looking up towards the residence and proposed improved structures. As you can see, there's very, very little visible from the cul-de-sac area. The way we develop these perspective images is it's a combination of looking at public contour maps and creating a digital program, using a program to digitally create the environment in real world. So we're able to be very, very accurate with elevations, and that coupled with Photoshop and photography, we can further enhance the
Joseph,
images.
that picture is the street leading up to the house, not the
Yes.
new driveway?
Yes, you'd be standing right at the end of the driveway in the cul-de-sac looking up at the Kimmel's
okay.
residence.
Got it.
So it is the driveway, correct?
Yes.
But it's before the driveway cuts off.
Correct.
Under the proposed plan.
Yes, you would not see that driveway from this perspective, or any perspective.
And so this is the existing Kimmel driveway, and the building that you can see to the left is the existing Kimmel residence.
That's correct.
And why do we have an A and B here? Can you explain the difference between A and B?
Yeah, we have the as installed image, and then we have an image that shows approximate height of vegetation after 5 to 7 years of growth.
And A would be as installed,
Yes,
and B would be at a further level of maturity.
yes, and
Got to tell you, they look like they're the same picture.
I'll tell you, I couldn't tell the difference, but I was looking on my computer today, and they're very similar, so.
Okay, just checking.
Yeah, the difference is very subtle. Most of the vegetation that you're actually seeing in this image here is existing vegetation. And the proposed plantings are actually further behind, and if you look very closely, you can see the tops of the trees starting to emerge.
Okay.
And there is, between a couple of the trees, you can see a little something. Would that be the structure?
Yes, I believe so.
And this, the technique you use to do this is something you use commonly in your field now?
Yes, we're using a combination of SketchUp modeling and an enhancement program called Lumion. Lumion?
Thanks.
Now, I've handed out our next exhibit, A, 26A and B. Can you tell the board, did you prepare this in a similar fashion as you did the last exhibit?
Yes. It's
And-
actually in the same model.
And what view is this showing?
This is a view from the approximate location of the deck on the back of the home on Lot 22, up towards the Kimmel's property, the closest neighbor.
And the deck that's shown there, that's not the actual deck, that's just a computer-generated graphic?
Right. We were able to determine the elevation of the deck, and we were able to site the deck itself and the home on Lot 22 within the model in the computer, giving us a very accurate representation both from an elevation standpoint and a distance standpoint.
And you can see two building structures here. They're connected, obviously, but the one on the left is the existing Kimmel residence, is that correct?
That's correct.
And the one on the right is the building addition?
Correct.
And this would be at the time of planting, like the last exhibit, the Exhibit A?
Yes.
And this is looking basically, if you were on the deck looking straight at this, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So if you were at other locations, you might not have such a straight view to it, is that correct?
Right. The orientation of the deck off the back of the house on Lot 22 would your vision would be a little bit more to the right.
So do you believe, as far as a person standing on the deck, this would be the shot you provided here would be the most direct view?
I believe so, yes.
And you mentioned when you went over the landscaping plan, the layers, is that reflected here?
Yes. The closest plantings to us represent that third layer right along the property line between Lot 22 and the Kimmel's lot. And then as you go back, you can see just the tops of the trees and the other layers of the screen buffer.
And I believe it might have been Mrs. Adams that testified earlier, if I'm remembering correctly. If you stood on the deck today, without all the trees that you're proposing, you can see the lighted tennis court that's there now, correct?
Yes.
Now turning to A26B, what does this represent?
This represents the exact same view after a period of 5 to 7 years of plant growth.
And you believe these are accurate representations of what your landscaping plan will achieve?
Yes. We were proposing that most of the trees would be going in at a height of 18 to 20 feet. And based upon the average growth rate of the species, we would easily achieve the heights shown in the computer model. So I believe it's a very accurate representation of reality.
Now, You're using a lot of evergreens, correct?
Yes.
I asked you to take a look at, from this same view, just to check what a winter view would look like, correct?
Yes, you did.
And that's 827?
Yes, that's correct. So as you can see, the only opening in the view shed here is actually from the existing deciduous tree, basically in the center of that image.
And in your professional opinion as a landscape architect and all of your experience, do you believe your plan will provide an effective screen of the proposed structure?
Yes, I do.
That's all I have for Mr. Blandy.
Okay, thank you. Does the board have any questions?
I do.
Oh, we'll accept you as an expert.
Yes,
Sorry.
I did forget to offer, I offer him as an expert. Thank you.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. With respect to A27, that image reflects several years of growth as opposed to sort of the first winter after planting, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Approximately 5 to 7 years.
Okay. You were nice enough to provide as planted and then with years of growth images. Do you have a as planted image here as opposed to simply providing us with the
This is the
image reflecting growth?
Oh, you're asking for the as planted in
Sure.
winter?
I mean, yeah, we had A25 A and B, A26 A and B, A27.
I do not have an as planted in winter, but it would be very, very similar to the as planted, only, let me see, which one is it?
It's just the one deciduous tree.
Right, it would be just this tree would allow views through, which it currently does, to the Kimmel's home. So that would be unchanged.
Thank you.
And Joseph, this is the closest resident, neighbor, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Any other questions from the board? Parties in interest? Any questions?
Thank you.
Mr. Blandy, the species that are going to be planted are all native.
No, they are not.
Some of them are European and are considered invasive species, correct?
No.
They are European, correct? The Norways are European?
Yes.
And they are in some quarters considered invasive?
I'm not aware that they are included in the native or non-native invasive category, no.
And in what's the typical lifespan of the arborvitae?
The green giant arborvitae, I would say the average lifespan is probably 40 to 50 years.
So at some point, they're going to have to be replaced in order to preserve any visual shield, right?
At some point, any plant would have to be replaced regardless.
So you've indicated that these trees are going to be 18 to 20 feet tall at the time of planting.
That's correct.
Where do you obtain trees for planting at that height?
We have sources. I have my own 24-acre nursery that we utilize on our projects, and I have a vast network of nurseries. An 18 to 20-foot tree is not hard to come by.
The trees that are going to be planted on the north side of the proposed sports building are going to be how far from the building itself?
I believe that planting bed is about 10 to 12 feet wide. So I would say center of plant would probably be 7 to 8 feet off the building.
And because of the elevation changes in that area, won't some of those trees be planted at a lower elevation than the base of the building itself?
Yes.
Several feet, typically, in that area?
You're talking about the plants all the way down at the property line on Lot 22?
No, I'm talking about the ones that are just below the north side of the building.
And you're wondering if, I'm sorry, I'm not understanding your
Yeah.
question.
Can we point them out on the plan, please?
Yeah, sure.
823?
I think he's referencing these trees here, correct?
That's correct. Yes. Those are going to be perhaps a couple of feet below the base of the building?
No, they're going to be planted at grade with the base of the building,
Right.
not below.
And the trees that are going to be planted to the north of the driveway are going to be several feet at least below the base of the building.
Yes.
And it's fair to say, is it not, that at least initially, none of these trees are going to shield a 35-foot building?
Not completely, but that's why we did the study with the renderings, so we could accurately determine what would and would not be covered.
If I may, let me take you to A26 and A27. It's correct, is it not, that the renderings in those exhibits do not look exactly at the area where the sports building will be?
No, they're looking exactly where the sports building will be.
Well, A26 looks at the sports building or
Yes,
to the right, and then
yes.
the dwelling to the left?
That's correct.
And this is taken from this is assumed from Lot 22, which is the Adams property?
That's correct.
Right.
They're both from the exact same angle to the structure. There's been no change other than showing the growth of the plant material.
And so you're telling the board then that in Exhibit A27, the sports building will be invisible from the deck on the Adams property after how many years?
We believe after 5 to 7 years, yes.
What's the rate of growth of those trees?
It differs from the different species. The cryptomeria has a growth rate of 2 to 3 feet per year. The Norway spruce also 2 to 3 feet per year, and the green giant arborvitae is 3 to 5 feet per year.
The board will bear with me for a moment. I have some photographs that I want to show the witness. We had submitted the our brief as part of a package that had a couple of exhibits attached to that. We would propose that that be our Exhibit 01, O for objectors 1. And next one I want to show, the next one I want to introduce is a photograph that I would mark as 02. Excuse me? 02, I'm going to put it on the board now.
Jim, do you have a copy for us?
Yeah, I think so, George. Let me see. You see Exhibit 02 that's on the board there?
I do.
Is that what the view toward the Kimmel property looks like now from the cul-de-sac?
It appears so, yes.
Okay. And is it your position that when the driveway is built coming off the main access driveway, that driveway will be entirely shielded by landscaping from the cul-de-sac?
Absolutely.
Hold on, George, trying to find you a copy of this one. I'll tell you what, let's use this one instead. Mr. Blandy, do you see Exhibit 03, which is on the board now?
I do.
Do you recognize what that's a view of and from where?
I do.
What is that?
It looks like it's a view from some portion of Lot 22 up towards the Kimmel's property.
And where, in reference, on that, using that picture as a reference guide, where would the furthest north plantings be placed in an attempt to shield the building?
We have plantings coming across the entire section up here. You can see the existing Emerald Sentinel arborvitae here, which have been eaten by the deer at the base. That is roughly the furthest north edge of the proposed structure, I believe.
I think that's all we have for Mr. Blandy. Thank you. Well, they're on the table, so I'm just going to leave them there. Is that okay, Gus? All right, thanks. Yeah, you can have those.
Yeah, can we,
I think that's all.
You can have mine. I'm sure Mr. Greenfield will get me a copy. I had written 02 and 03 on the back. As I mentioned, I think I'd like to call the architect briefly. This will be quick, I hope.
Okay, yes, briefly.
Or my questions will be quick.
Stephen, with a B, Bollinger, Bollinger.
And I wasn't planning on calling Steve, so I don't have a CV, but can you describe your professional and educational background?
I obtained my architecture degree from University of Oregon in 1997. I've worked for a number of firms in the area. I've been with Archer and Buchanan for 16 years. And this is the fourth such sport court building that I've worked on for Archer and Buchanan.
And are you a licensed architect
I am.
in Pennsylvania?
Yes.
I'd like to offer Steve as an expert in architecture.
Without objection.
Thank you. You're the architect for this project?
Correct.
You heard the testimony previously when Mr. Greenfield was asking Dave Fiorello some questions about the tennis court.
Yes.
Could you explain, you know, the design goal here? What are you proposing in terms of a tennis court here? Is it regulation-sized tennis court?
Correct. We proposed to replace the tennis court that existed on the property, and we even located the building on the footprint of that tennis court. At the time, it seemed like an easy, straightforward thing to do, but we are replacing that tennis court with this tennis court. It's the same size. It's regulation. And then we're also replacing a pool and a pool house that was on the site. So the pool house in this case is attached to the tennis court building, which is why it's a little bit bigger than a regulation tennis court size.
And the pool house, I think we went over this, but the pool house that's there now is in the setback, and that
That's correct.
nonconformity will be removed, correct?
That's correct. The pool house that's in the setback is being removed. The pool is being relocated closer to the house. for perceived safety reasons for the kids. They can be monitored by someone at the house.
And there's obviously a connection to the house, and there's circulation areas, but other than areas like that, is the building any larger, in your opinion, than it needs to be to provide for a regulation tennis court?
It provides for a regulation tennis court and a pool house.
But as far as the tennis court part,
The tennis court it's actually a little bit smaller than a regulation tennis court. But the owners have said, okay, well, we can make it smaller by a couple feet. But height-wise, it meets the requirements for a tennis court as well.
and do you have an estimate of what the height of this building would be by the Radnor code definition?
According to the Radnor zoning code, the building height is right around 30 feet.
That's all I have for Steve.
Any questions from board members? Steve, I have a question. I mean, was there any consideration to some alternatives to putting this building up? I mean, like a dome? And maybe that's ridiculous, but I'm asking the question. Would that be less obtrusive than?
Are you asking if we considered a dome?
Yes.
No, we didn't. You're talking about like an inflatable?
Yeah.
We did not consider that. We did consider a rounded roof initially, as that lowered the height of the building quite a bit. That yielded a 25-foot building height. But it's my understanding that the neighbors pressed for a gabled roof, which brings the building height up a little bit. So.
But the height is still under what is allowed by code.
35 feet, yeah, it's under 35 feet.
Okay, thank you. Jim, any questions for the witness?
No, I have no question.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else, George?
I just wanted to put in the record, I guess kind of like Mr. Cornelia did, I had a sampling of some slope decisions that had been approved. I know there were many more. 829. I think that's all I have for my direct case. I would like to reserve a rebuttal. If Mr. Greenfield's putting on evidence, I would ask that my exhibits be entered into the record.
For the benefit of the people that are listening the first time, just restate your hardship. Because now, especially with that, you're only going after a single variance for the steep slopes, and I think the obviously the other one, I think you're probably going for a little bit more of a de minimis type variance. But just for our benefit, restate the hardship, because I think we have a memo in front of us that argues that there is none, but I'd like to hear what you have to say.
Sure. Thanks for that question. I'm referring to 820, which was the proposed site plan that had the slope areas numbered. Even though these, we contend they're man-made slopes, the township does regulate them. So our position is that the hardship is that we have testimony that shows this building is a permitted use. It significantly exceeds the zoning requirements. It's got way larger setbacks. It's way under on building coverage. It's way under on impervious coverage. Meets all of the other requirements. We moved it out of the setback. And you can see from the plan, and there's already a lighted tennis court here. But for these bands of steep slope, which are scattered throughout the site, there's no way to replace what is there essentially with something that's otherwise permitted because of these unique features of the land. So that is the hardship, the location, the configuration of these slopes. You can see they're scattered all around. Ironically, we believe clearly slopes 2 and 3 were probably created by building a tennis court there in the first place. So You know, it's just the location of the slopes that would otherwise prohibit something that's completely within code other than the slopes. So that is the hardship.
Any other questions? I will mention, regarding public comment, we have received, and all board members have received copies of letters. We have received a total of 10 letters, some pro, some con, but they will be taken into account in our decision-making. Regarding tonight for public comment, we've already had public comment. It was at the first hearing, but I'll give a very limited opportunity to those who were not at the first hearing to come up if they have anything to add to what they heard tonight. And only those folks who were not at the first meeting, Scouts honor. Please. Yes, come on up.
Good evening.
Good evening. I'm sorry, what is your name again?
So my name is Dr. Winifred Constable. I'm a physician. I work locally. I work about 70 hours a week, which is why I wasn't there at the first meeting. Actually left work tonight to come here tonight. So I just want to make two comments. So the first is that this is totally out of keeping with our neighborhood. This is an immense institutional size building.
And what is your address? Are you
We live at 200 East Laurier Place. My husband and I, we have 3 children. We've raised here for about the last 30 years. This is larger than our home. We own the original mansion on the Laurier space. This dwarfs the size of our home. Yep, sure, of course. So it is just not in the keeping of our neighborhood. When we moved to the neighborhood, it was our understanding that homes were built. It's a quiet, sedate neighborhood, and this is a massive institution. Not only is it out of keeping with the neighborhood, but it sets a precedent that further neighbors would be able to build similar such structures. So that's my first issue. The other thing is that as a true plant lover, I was obviously a science major in college, but I studied a great deal of botany. This disrupts, what makes Pennsylvania beautiful, what makes our area beautiful are wonderful trees. Okay, nobody can argue that. If you've lived here for years and watched springs and summers and falls come and go, it's one of the great magics of our area. And when you disrupt the natural trees of this area, you're destroying what is beautiful here. I would just like to read something here. Norway spruce trees introduced into America from Northern Europe are now considered invasive species. As they invade an area, the Norways creates a new habitat that few native plants can tolerate. Okay, so we're talking about plants. If you study plants at great length, you understand that trees their root systems are not only as deep as the height of the tree, but as wide as the width of the tree. Now, when you go into an area, you're not, even if you're not taking trees out, you're disrupting tree systems within the area. And now this landscaper says that these trees are not invasive. I'm reading you right out of a document here. They are in fact invasive. Now, you can create other trees, but there will be other issues. So it's not just for the two issues for me personally as a local resident is that, number one, this is not in keeping with our neighborhood. You're putting in an institutional size structure, not a small, lovely little, sports structure. It's institutional. And no matter how you argue it, that's the fact. Number two, it's totally out of keeping with our neighborhood. And number three, you're going to do permanent disruption to native plants that exist here. No matter what you do, you just can't avoid that because of native plant systems and that exist in the area.
Thank you, Doctor. Any other comments? Make it quick.
Stable, and I am the owner of Laurier. What?
What?
I do, thank you so much. I'm the owner of the main mansion, Arthur DeMos's.
Yeah, did you send a letter? You sent a letter, didn't you?
No, I did not, but
Constable?
thank you. Should I have? I did not. I did not. I'm going to take this board on a 3-minute exercise over the 100 years of that property. I think you should understand, it'll be well, and I won't speak.
It's really not relevant to what we're deciding tonight. We're
I think it would be
deciding a
helpful. Why don't you-
variance,
It
a
is
variance
actually
and scope.
focused- I appreciate that, Mr. Sir, but it's focused precisely on the variance. May I continue?
Please,
Thank you.
make it quick.
Is it otherwise covered
it's
in?
focused directly on.
Why don't you let me answer finish my question? Thank you. Is what you're going to testify to already covered in a letter that's been submitted to this board?
No, sir.
Okay. And are you related to Dr. Constable who just?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Are we going to treat households as a commenter, or are there, well, in my household, there are differing views, and there could be different comments. So I
I'm not
grant
getting near
you
that one.
that might not be the perfect solution.
Please continue.
Okay, thanks. So I can make it quick. I have the original plans from the property from 1916 that were designed by the Olmsted brothers. They show the topography. I'm sure they've been given to you. If not, we can supply them. Secondly, I got in touch with the DeMosses, about directly from Nancy, who's the former owner. I have a letter from Deborah DeMoss stating that Vincent Kling, who designed the tennis court in conjunction with other DeMoss, did not change any slopes in the construction of the court. And that's all I have to say to you. And I can supply those if needed. That was in 75, 76. And then I did speak with Dave England, who was with Bentley, and they couldn't find anything in the 98. It's not hearsay. I can supply the email if you like.
No, actually, it's still hearsay.
Okay.
Yeah,
As a
it's
legal
hearsay.
matter, it's still hearsay.
Doesn't change the veracity.
All right, well, is that all?
It is,
Thank you very much, John.
for your time as well.
Okay. Okay, well, one more?
I do. My name is Paul, middle initial J, last name Richard, spelled R-I-C-H-A-R-D. I live at 952 Mill Road, across the street from the Laurier development. I own one of the old Strawbridge Mansion servants' houses, if you will, the furthest one up Mill Road. The bottom of my driveway is pretty much directly across the street from the tennis courts, up the hill. I believe in property rights for owners, maybe more so than what's legally acceptable, but I do think this is too large for the keeping it a residential area, number one. And number two, I didn't see if there was going to be any screening of plant material, I'm going to say on the west side, facing the tennis courts are here, the hill, Mill Road, my house. I was wondering if there's any screening material, buffering material between my view at the bottom of my driveway and then indeed the house on the top of the hill and the new structure. So I would like to see some plant material planted as a buffer on, I'm going to say, the west side. And I do think this is too large a development for keeping in the residential feel of the neighborhood. That's all I had.
Thank you, Paul.
gentlemen.
Appreciate it.
Have a good night.
Okay, one more.
John, J-O-N, Newton, N-E-W-T-O-N. I have the other property on the old Strawbridge Estate, 946 Mill Road, right down the hill from where this is going to be built. I wasn't here for the first meeting because I didn't know about it. For some reason, got notified about this one. Concern is about the stormwater. I've lived there for 40 years or so. I've been flooded at least 12 times, my land, the last time resulting in a major insurance claim. The stormwater, I don't know much about, except that the management is inadequate, and I don't know how this is going to help that or make it worse. It sounds, from what I heard, that it's going to be integrated with the existing system, which we know to be inadequate. The township is well aware of the flooding that's taken place on our property. They've been there to bolster the stream a couple of times. I fear that the water coming off this thing is going to just add to the problem I already have.
Okay, thank you, John. No further public comment. Parties in interest, Jim, to make like a summation if you care to, 2 minutes.
Thank you. If I could have a little bit of latitude on that 2 minutes, and the reason I need it is because I know that not every member of the board has seen a copy of the memorandum, so there are a couple of points of law that I think are critical for the board to consider as it goes to make its decision here, and I'll try to get through those as fast as I can. First of all, with regard to the cases that George submitted, they're very easily distinguishable from what's before the board in this case. The amount of steep slopes disturbed in those cases was microscopic compared to the 1/5 of an acre, 8,500 square feet plus that's proposed to be disturbed in this particular situation. And in one of those cases, the adjoining property owners actually supported the variance request, and you have nothing like that before you here. This proposed project is a substantial overreach that simply is not entitled to a variance. And if you look at the MPC and the many cases that have been decided on dimensional variances, there have been dozens of them in the 23 plus years, almost 24 years since Hertzberg was decided. The cases have made it very, very clear that the applicant continues to have a heavy burden to meet in order to show entitlement to a variance. And if you look at the MPC, which is very strictly applied in many of these cases, including cases decided as recently as last March, there are 3 provisions of Section 910.2A of the MPC that are directly implicated here. The first is Subsection 2, which says that, which relates to hardship and says that because of the physical conditions that exist on the property, quote, there is no possibility that the property can be developed in strict conformity with the provisions of the zoning ordinance, and that the authorization of a variance is therefore necessary to enable the reasonable use of the property. So the first point I want to make on that is this property is already reasonably used. It has a substantial dwelling on it, 3,900 square foot footprint plus. It has a pool. It has a tennis court. The purchase price for it was $1.8 million. Its assessed value was nearly $1.7 million. There's no way it can be argued that this property is not now being reasonably used. So that standard cannot possibly be met, and a variance is not necessary to enable the reasonable use of the property. The second such provision is subsection 3 of 910.2A, and that says that such unnecessary hardship has not been created by the appellant. In this case, you've heard some testimony that possibly the applicant could have considered a smaller scale development but elected not to do that. Tennis court, as Mr. Fiorello acknowledged, requires 7,200 square feet of space, and yet you have a proposed building structure that's very nearly 12,000 square feet. So the idea that this is the minimum that the property owner could propose in order to make reasonable use of the property is absurd. It's just not the case.
Mr. Greenfield, I'm sorry, could I ask a question?
Sure.
Taking a very, very quick step back to the point about reasonable use, if we can. If this lot were flat, would the construction of a sport court be an unreasonable use? If it's permitted by the code and you didn't have the issue of steep slopes, isn't the enactment of a zoning code by the elected officials of a township prima facie reasonable as it's been determined by the people whose job it is to make the laws?
Yeah, the zoning code is a reasonable enactment, yes. If that's the question, I'm not.
So if this were being constructed by right, it wouldn't be unreasonable to construct this facility in juxtaposition with the already improved house and other structures?
Well, that's a question that goes to another part of the argument relating to subsection 5 of 910.2a. This is completely out of character with the neighborhood. So if you're asking whether the steep slope problem were eliminated, yeah, you have a large lot here. It's a 3-acre plus lot. You're not up against building coverage limitations or impervious limitations. The question is the scale of what's being proposed here and how it fits into the neighborhood. But of course, you can't look at this without the steep slope issue, because that's a reasonable enactment of the township commissioners in order to provide a certain level of environmental protection for people. It's an acknowledgement that when you build on steep slopes, you're going to affect people downstream, regardless of how much stormwater management you might implement. And so it's a reasonable regulation designed to protect other property owners. And the level that's proposed for disturbance of steep slopes in this case is unprecedented and extraordinary. I mean, in my experience in the township, I've never seen anything close to this. And there's certainly nothing like it in Laurier.
Thank you.
Let me get back for a moment to 910.2A3. The hardship is not created by the appellant. In this instance, and we cited some cases on this, as on all of these points in our brief, the applicants have in effect created their own hardship by insisting upon a development that's far in excess of what they might need even for an indoor tennis court. They're going way, way beyond that. And as Mr. Fiorello conceded, if this development had been scaled back, it could have minimized steep slope disturbance or possibly in some instances completely eliminated it. But you have no attempt by the applicant to do that. This is a wish project, not a necessity project, in order to get economic value out of a piece of property. The third provision that I want to bring to your attention, which is critical here, is subsection 5 of that section of the MPC. And what it says is that the variance, if authorized, will represent the minimum variance that will afford relief and will represent the least modification possible of the regulation in issue. So it's, as I just mentioned, they can't possibly show that. They could build a scaled back structure that would disturb less steep slopes. They haven't elected to do it. And finally, I want to look at subsection 4 of that section of the MPC, because this relates to the way that this proposal fits into the neighborhood and the extent to which it will affect neighbors. Subsection 4 says that the variance, if authorized, will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood or district in which the property is located, nor substantially or permanently impair the appropriate use or development of adjacent property, nor be detrimental to the public welfare. And I think you've heard ample testimony from all of the neighbors that this proposed development is way out of step with the rest of Laurier and really with the entire area around Laurier. This just doesn't fit in. It's going to have an adverse effect on the contiguous property owners, particularly the Adams in Lot 22, who are going to be looking directly at this massive structure, and they're going to see it regardless of how many trees you plant in front of it, because it's going to be probably 35 feet tall. Again, in the brief, we cited a number of cases. There are just dozens of them that indicate that this burden of proof remains very high on dimensional variances, and that if they can make reasonable use of the property in some manner that's compliant with the zoning code, then they're not entitled to a variance to violate the zoning code. And that's really what's attempted here. This is not a necessity, it's a wish, and they've not met the burden that's required by Pennsylvania law for a variance. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim.
Any questions?
I do. How do you combat the fact that there has been ample testimony from experts that these slopes are man-made. We have an exception in our code that says if it's under a permit, go ahead. You can do whatever you want because it was approved by the township engineer. Is your argument saying that if there is ample testimony that for some reason a permit wasn't taken, let's say plans were inaccurate, whatever. I mean, there's certainly been times I think we've gone to the township building trying to look for something and it's not there. That your testimony is just because, even though it is ample testimony from experts saying that it's man-made, this property owner did not do that. In fact, it may have been 2 property owners before, that they should never be entitled to a variance? Because that's what you're in act doing, because I'm trying to distinguish here between a disagreement or a dislike of the structure, which is fine. You can like it, you can not like it. This guy could build a barn if it's in the building area, and it would be out of character with the neighborhood, and he can do it by right. I'm more looking at what he's trying to disturb at this point. Is there enough testimony to be able to say, you know what, I think it's man-made. I don't think this is his fault. He didn't create this hardship. He didn't create these slopes. But because someone else did and they didn't pull a permit, he now is foreclosed from ever developing, tearing down the house, building up a 12,000 square foot property, and happen to say, you know what, I'd like to put the garage on that side as opposed to this side that it's on. I'm sorry you're precluded from ever doing that. Because let's be clear, he's got a large amount of space here, which means under the code, he can build a lot. As long as it's, you know, again, as long as it's within the code, or he has, or he can get, you know, a variance by right. I'm trying to distinguish between something that we've heard testimony on about it being man-made slopes versus natural vegetation, natural slopes.
We could have a very lengthy discussion about man-made slopes. I've been having this discussion before this board and many others for, you know, probably 30 years. And to say very briefly, my view on that is that if the slopes were made in order to facilitate earlier development, then they should be sacrosanct from further violation. And that's just a quick summary of the position on it. But this isn't about man-made versus non-man-made versus natural. This, as Kevin Kashansky has determined, and as I think the applicants have agreed, is about the distinction between regulated and unregulated steep slopes in accordance with 280.112I. And I know that Kevin's made the determination that the slope areas you heard about earlier are all regulated, and therefore to be disturbed require a variance. And my understanding is, I thought I heard George say that he acknowledged that a variance is required. So once you're in the territory where the variance is required, then I think you have to determine whether you're going to set a precedent that allows extraordinary disturbance of steep slopes, or whether you're going to honor the letter of the zoning code and enforce it. So that's really what it comes down to, I think.
Okay, thank you. George, anything? Finish up?
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I think some of the board members hit on it. I understand the neighbors don't seem to like the structure. Some of them, there were many supporters, but I think, you know, if there was no building here at all and property owner just wanted to disturb these slopes, I think our testimony has shown, you know, there's no detrimental impact to anybody from that, and the people are really complaining about the building, which we've shown greatly exceeds the requirements. The Hertzberg case that I cited, there were many other cases that the courts have decided that they've allowed all kinds of structures under the Hertzberg doctrine. Jim cited some in his memo that I received this morning when I woke up. I didn't have time to put together a memo, but I could give you 8 or 10 cases that upheld Hertzberg, and I know a lot of the cases that Jim cited. You know, one was a Land Rover dealership that they had no testimony about the land at all. They said Land Rover makes us do all these things, so we need 10 variances, and there was no testimony about the land. We have the testimony on the land. They are man-made slopes. They would have been exempted if they had a permit, as Mr. DeLizia indicated. So we believe we do meet the standards for this under the MPC as they apply to this type of variance. And as to the amount of slopes, it's not that significant of amount of slope. You can see they're all scattered about, and it's a very large property. And some of the other cases that I had, were for much smaller properties. So in concept or in context of the property, it's a relatively small amount of area.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll ask for a motion.
We're done with public comment.
Yeah, we finished before the summaries, yeah. Anyone like to make a motion?
All right, someone needs to make it. I'm going to move to approve variance under section 280, 112D and E, steep slope regulations to disturb slopes in excess of 20% in accordance with the testimony.
There's a second?
I'll second.
Okay, board discussion?
Certainly glad to see that the building was turned. I think that helped me tremendously from last time to understand that you're trying to accommodate kind of what you heard both from the neighbors and I think probably what you're getting counsel from your lawyer on about, really being able to get a variance. When I take a look at the plans, when I think about the expert testimony that we got, in my mind, I'm looking at 5B, 4, 2, and 3 from Exhibit A20, and I'm just kind of going, there's no way that this is not man-made, and there's no way that a homeowner should, be, basically held that they can't do a thing because someone didn't pull a permit. Because I can tell you, I know a number of people, even in my neighborhood, that have not pulled permits. And so it's a common thing, and again, you shouldn't, I don't think a future owner of a property should have should there be not be able to do anything there. I mean, these are not areas of the property that are, substantially far away from a property. I mean, you couldn't even do an addition here. It's that close. So in my mind, really what I'm thinking about is one. That's my issue. That's what I'm trying to get over. The driveway, the reason why I think you really have to disturb one is just because of that driveway, and you want to make sure that it's solid and it's not going to move, and you want the driveway to have people to drive up there to obviously play tennis as opposed to parking in the cul-de-sac or parking in your driveway. So to me, that's what I'm struggling with is, if the driveway was not there, I'd be going, boom. I think, my mind, it's not a hardship that the owner created, and it does make it peculiar. It makes it almost impossible to do anything around the house when it comes to those four specific areas. But to me, I'm just struggling with one, and I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of my colleagues' thoughts, because maybe I'll get persuaded. And by the way, just for the record, I want to make sure this is on the record, because I've had to deal with this. Every single tree that this expert came up and talked about, if you go to the Shade Tree Commission and look at their acceptable trees in the neighborhood, they're there. So I know they may not be in our neighborhood right now, but our Shade Tree Commission is saying they are acceptable to come into our neighborhood. And I'm actually noticing that they're planting one of the trees that I put in my backyard because I took out a tree. So I'm impressed with the tree plan. I think that is I think you're doing a fantastic job to try to buffer what you're doing from the rest of the neighborhood, which is certainly not required by code. But it certainly shows that you're doing your best to accommodate.
I'll go. So, I agree with you, Brad. It's that driveway and parking lot that really is what gives me pause here, but leave that aside for a second. What I'm weighing is the impact on the community, on the neighborhood. There's a lot of opposition. You've got near neighbors opposed to this thing. And, you know, that's a component of what we have to analyze. But I weigh that against the issue of the hardship, and I agree with you. Here, how can we tell a homeowner that they can't build something where they're, working to minimize the disturbances? Although I guess that's one of the questions, are they minimizing those disturbances? One of the things that came out in November, and I did have a chance to breeze through the opposition brief, but one of the things that stood out to me at the original hearing was that they wouldn't be able to go in and maintain, whether it's the pool, the existing pool house, or the tennis court for that matter, without disturbing these slopes. I guess, so that to me weighs in favor of the hardship at the end of the day, is that if we can't even get to the backyard to maintain it without disturbance, then, aren't we also now improving things, or at least according to testimony, stormwater management is improved, or at least it's been represented to us to be improved. So, yeah, that's kind of where I am. I kind of wish the driveway and parking lot wasn't in front of us. I think it would make the decision a lot easier. But at the end of the day, I think I've heard hardship, and I'm kind of leaning in that direction.
Yeah, this is one where there's no perfect solution. There are sides that are going to be thrilled with whatever it is we do, and sides obviously that will be disappointed in our determination. The challenge here is whether the variance is necessary to permit the reasonable use of the property. I mean, when we get right down to it, it's a question of reasonableness of the use. And clearly, there's a difference of opinion in the neighborhood as to what is a reasonable or unreasonable use of the property. So we get to at least decide this evening what that might be, and whether the grant of the variance is necessary to permit that use. It is certainly a large structure, and it is, again, on a flat piece of ground. It would be permitted under our zoning code by right now that it has been relocated within the building envelope. This is not a situation where a homeowner is being unresponsive to the concerns of their neighbors. Significant time and resources have been put to the task of trying to modify the plan in ways that adjoining landowners would like to see the development go forward. That's certainly something that indicates that the homeowners are trying to be responsive to the neighborhood and to construct a project which is sensitive to its setting, which is not always easy. There are always going to be folks that would think that this type of an improvement is unnecessary, is out of character, is simply not what the neighborhood is. Just look around and see how many other properties have large sport courts constructed on their properties. I mean, that's not an observation that doesn't hold some weight as well. I think so far I've put one foot on either side of the fence here, but because I'm still struggling with this decision, quite frankly.
You can stop. We'll know soon enough.
At the request of my chairman, I will stop, except to observe that the fact that these are applicants who are looking to try to work with the neighbors to the extent that they feel they can and still develop their property. That should not be forgotten.
This reminds me of a Hubert Humphrey quote. Yes. He once said, "I don't know my position on the issue because I haven't started talking." Sorry, John. I think where I am on this, I agree with Brad, but I think it's really unfortunate that a variance is needed here. The only thing we're talking about are the steep slopes, and most likely they were man-made, and somebody didn't grab a permit, but now that's where we are. We're stuck here, and I don't believe that the applicant meets the requirements for a variance, and it's based on, in my opinion, the scope and size of the project. The character certainly not consistent with the development in the location and the neighborhood, and it is extremely not consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. And I think for that reason, I don't see that it meets the gauntlet of requirements you have to meet for a variance. So I'll call the vote.
Mr. Chairman, before we do a vote,
Yes.
I'm sorry if I'm being redundant, but I didn't have it checked off. I just want to confirm that the applicants and the opponents' exhibits are made part of the record. I don't know if we ticked off that box.
They are. Do we have to do something else to make that
No,
happen?
if your declaration that they're part of the record
They
is
are
all we need.
part of the record. Hear that, Rich? Okay. Okay, we'll call the vote. John?
I'm going to vote against the motion to approve.
Brad?
I'm going to vote in favor.
Rich?
I'm going to vote in favor.
I'm going to vote against. Unfortunately, it's a tie, so the application is not approved. Thank you, everyone, for coming and participating. Let's do a quick 5-minute recess, and then we'll have appeal number 3121. back. You went out and had dinner somewhere?
I'm watching all the time. I'm
Oh,
listening
really?
to your audio at the door and watching public TV.
Oh, boy. You may approach.
I understand, but what I'm trying to say is, you know, when you do a project like this, you can talk to your neighbor. I am the neighbor, and he's never spoken. So I just wanted to let you know. Thank you. Thank you, and thank you very much for your time. I know it's a long time. Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, why don't we get started? Yep. So Appeal 3121, the applicant Christopher Rose doing business as Zesto's Pizza, property located at 908 Conestoga Road and zoned Garrett Hill Commercial. Applicant wishes to install a modular refrigeration unit on the rear of the property. Applicant seeks a variance from sections 280-49.8.A, 1B, and C, and 280-49.11B relating to side and rear yard setbacks and buffer area, or in the alternative, such other relief consistent with the exhibits and testimony presented at the zoning hearing.
Thank you. Nick Keneally, representing the applicant. I've marked as A13 the permission from the landlord, which was not in the file.
Thank you. I guess that works.
Also, you'll see from the application that, and I believe it is shown on Exhibit A12, and you'll see on the second page of A12, that dark area, just so to familiarize the board with the application, this is the property. It's only, I believe, 18 feet wide. There's Zesto Pizzas and that strip there. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, on Conestoga Road and Garrett Hill.
Right.
This is the area. There is some parking spots in the front. This is the existing building here. And then in the rear is this area where the, it's being proposed, the structure. The applicant, actually before I got involved, had the engineers prepare a plan, and it showed a modular unit that's 25 feet long by almost 11 and a half, 12 feet wide in this location, at the very back of the property. The very back of the property is adjacent on this side to a residentially zoned property that is vacant at this time. It's actually kind of part of that larger property in the front, I believe, where the flower store is. In the rear of this unit is a parking lot. It's actually a commercial parking lot that's used by the bar on the corner of Garrett Avenue and Conestoga Road. I actually recall a variance was granted to use that back when the Hampshires owned that property, when it was called Jerky's. And yeah, there was a variance granted for that parking lot in the rear there to permit parking. They had actually torn down a house that was adjacent to their bar. So even though it's zoned residential, it is a commercial parking lot in the rear. But in any event, we went back and looked at this unit and decided, you know, it's kind of is violating rear yard setback, side yard setback, and it's butting against residential properties. So we went back, and today actually, I called in Mr. Burkhart, and we went over an alternative plan, which is the plan that we are actually proposing to the board this evening, and I'll hand that up as well, but I'll explain it to you first. So this is a scaled version of the plan. Here's the original proposed structure here. We are proposing where it's cross-hatched in blue, this structure. And the reason we're proposing it here, too, is that we are removing the violation of the side yard setbacks. We have 5 feet, which is the requirement on this end. We have 5 feet on this end. We have the requirement for rear yard setback is 15 feet. We are actually moving it 21 feet from the rear yard setback. And you'll see by the measurements here, it's actually 8 feet wide by 15 feet deep, so it's substantially reduced. So that's the proposal that we're bringing before the board this evening. I'll hand that up, and I also had prepared another plan also to scale that just shows the engineer had done a building envelope area. Remember, this is the building, the existing building, this is the area in the rear. And he had done a building envelope that was actually 23 feet from the Bilco doors and 13 feet wide. Although that 13 feet wide didn't take into consideration the 5-foot setback that's required next to the commercial property here. So actually, we have made it so that it fits within the setbacks, fits and does not violate the rear yard setback. There is a provision of the code that says there shall be no outdoor storage of merchandise. That provision, it's 4911B, says no permanent storage of merchandise, articles, or equipment shall be permitted outside a building. That actually came into play with the flower store that Kevin and I have gone around about several times, and this board has actually heard, I think, at least twice right now, and if not more. And Kevin's interpretation of that is because a modular unit is outdoor storage and you're storing something in the unit. I think it can also be interpreted that it means when you actually are storing goods outside themselves, unenclosed. And for the flower store, we did receive relief from that requirement. But they're the kind of the provisions that we're looking at here regarding the code. So I'll just present these exhibits, and I'll present Mr. Burkhart to present testimony on it. But I just wanted to give you an overview initially to narrow the scope of what really is being discussed here. So I'm going to hand up that A14 and then A15 as well.
Quick question, as I'm looking, but if this was attached to the building, you would not be here.
I'm sorry?
If this was
Yeah,
attached to the
if it was
building, you would not
attached,
be
we
here.
would not be here, yeah.
Okay. If for some reason there was a plank that was connected between this thing and the building that made it connected, you would not be here.
Yeah, and, you know,
Okay.
the problem is, of
Or
course.
an awning or something like that,
Yeah,
yes.
you know, we have the Belco doors there, kind of makes it a little, you know, difficult to attach the Belco doors to the basement, you know, and it'd be a major reconstruction, I think, if we tried to attach it. No, but yeah. He was saying it'd be wired to the building. I don't know if that makes it part of the building.
I do. Eric Burkhart, ERIC, BURKHART. Yeah, I can do that.
Eric, what is your relationship to Zesto Pizza?
I am 50% owner and CFO of Zesto Pizza.
And the other partner is?
Christopher Rose.
Okay. And how long you been co-owner?
Since the fall of 2018.
And how long has Chris Rose been involved with Zesto?
Since late summer 2012.
I'm going to show you a couple documents. First is the deed that we marked as A2, correct, to the property. A3 is your under current lease with the owner, is that correct?
Correct.
And I believe we have marked already as A13, the permission of the landlord to proceed with this application, right? Now, you're requesting to install a modular unit on the site?
We are, yes.
Why do you need this unit, and why does it need to be outside?
So the 8x15 is about double the size of our walk-in box now, and we don't currently have a walk-in freezer. When the store opened in 2012, the walk-in box that was there is what we are currently using, and we have since increased business-wise, and we've also been trying to increase quality-wise, which takes up space for fresh goods.
What's the condition of that current unit that you have in the premises?
Regardless of this outcome, that'll either be getting taken out or it'll be getting replaced in the store. So it's going to go soon, so we need a new one.
We've seen, I've marked as A12 is the plan, and you heard me state that the property is only 18 feet wide, is that correct?
Correct.
And actually, the building is a little bit less than the property itself.
On the inside of the building, yes.
Yeah, so actually, to the outside walls of the building is about 15 feet wide, 15 and a half feet wide, and that's to the outside wall.
Correct.
I'm going to show you the aerial just to, I'm sure the board's familiar with the property and the area, but this is the area, correct? Here's Conestoga Road, Garrett Avenue, and you're one of the strip stores located at the corner of Garrett and Conestoga.
Correct.
All right, and we have another close-up view of that we'll show a little bit later as to what we described earlier during the opening as to the parking lots. And matter of fact, the parking lot that I'm showing right here, this is the parking lot that I referred to as being part of Flippin' Bailey's currently. It used to be, that was done by Jerky's, correct?
Correct.
This lot here. So showing what's been marked, it's A5, and it's the front of your store.
It is.
And this area here where it looks like a driveway, that's not part of your property.
That's the neighboring property.
A6, again, it shows the bar, the Chinese restaurant, your restaurant, the driveway to, which is currently a vacant building, used to be a pizza shop too, I believe, or a
Correct,
restaurant.
yes.
Used to be a restaurant as well. And A7, this is just a view looking west, showing the street itself, and showing obviously it's commercial on the other side as well. There's a bar on the corner there.
Yes.
Okay. And then A8 is just looking east again. And I mentioned the flower shop, and you see that on the corner a little bit further down from your property, and then the strip stores on the other side of the street. Correct?
Correct.
You have to respond.
Sorry.
And then A9, a little bit closer view of what we're referring to, the parking. So you have your building here where the arrow is. Then in the back, there's a paved area that we have some pictures of that we'll show. And then this is the area for the park, for what we refer to as the parking for the old Horse P. Jerky's. Correct?
Correct.
And A10, this is a view of your property looking toward
the
the
back of our
building. This is the
building.
back of the building. And then A10 or A11, there's an area in the back that, as I mentioned, the area is 18 feet wide. There's a parking spot here where the white car is parked. That is part on your property and part on
The Chinese restaurant's
the
property.
Chinese restaurant's property. I mean, you use it, that one parking spot.
It's the same landlord for our building and the Chinese restaurant.
Okay. And then this area here, it looks like it's kind of boxed out. Not really a parking spot.
I don't think it's officially a parking spot now.
Okay. And actually, the area that we're showing where see if I can show it on one of the plans. Here it is. This area here, where I'm outlining, here is the adjacent, here's your property, here's the adjacent property. And the outline of that parking spot, as we mentioned, is in this area here, correct?
Correct.
All right. And actually, that's not a 9.5 by 20 parking spot as required by code, right? It's much narrower and much smaller than
Yes.
that. All right. The relocation of the unit, from here to there, what effect does that? Will you still be able to use that parking spot? Granted, it's not a legal 9.5 by 20, but you still be
Yes.
able to access it.
We will still be able to access that parking spot.
You access it from, I guess,
From Garrett Avenue.
from Garrett Avenue. Okay.
Excuse me, that's just an informal relationship as opposed to a license or something
Yeah, I think
more formal?
the owner owns both the owner of the property obviously owns both properties, and he runs, I think, the Chinese restaurant on the other side. Does he run it, or someone else?
No, it's another
Yeah.
person.
It's informal, and he's permitted to use it. Going to show you, let's look at the plan, what we had submitted earlier, just to familiarize the board on what we're proposing again. I'm showing you what's been marked as A14 first. And this is a scaled version of the plan, right?
Of the initial plan?
Of the initial plan? Correct?
Correct.
All right. And again, it shows the original plan of the outdoor refrigeration unit being 11.58 by 25 feet.
Correct.
And then you had the parking stripe here that we're referencing. And then this line is a building envelope line, so that's 15 feet from the rear, correct?
Correct.
And then there's 23 feet from the rear setback line to the Belco doors,
Correct.
correct? And then there's 13 feet wide from the property line to the west and the setback line.
Correct.
And on A15, what is blue hatched is what you are proposing here this evening,
That is correct.
and that unit is 8 by 15.
Correct.
And your feeling you still can use this parking stripe here, this parking,
Yes.
you can still pull in there.
Yeah.
And again, if you could tell the board the need for this.
The need for the walk-in?
Right.
So we're kind of capped out at being able to either expand our quality or our business at this point with our current walk-in space, with our storage space. So this would help us be able to continue to be creative and expand our business, and it would also expand the prep space in the store.
You do have some letters of support from various neighbors in the neighborhood?
From neighboring businesses, yes.
Okay. And I've marked that as A16?
Yes.
I have nothing further at this time.
Any questions for the witness, board?
Is there any, I guess there's not, because it's not in the, but is there any way to see what the walk-in box itself would look like from the outside?
Yeah, I don't have, do you know, can you describe what it would be?
It would just be a rectangle, about 7 feet high, steel on the outside. Yeah, but we did take into consideration the sound. The compressor would be located in our basement, not outside on the unit, so that if they were to click on overnight or anything, it wouldn't be disturbing anyway.
And then if you look at A10, there's it shows that's the one facing the rear of the building. You've got the dumpsters.
Correct.
That won't be affected by what you're proposing?
The dumpsters would instead move into the open spot, that boxed off spot.
Oh, okay.
So they would just move.
The non-parking
to the
spot.
right, if you were facing them. Yes, the
Gotcha.
non-parking spot.
Okay.
The storage box, is that permanently affixed, or if at some point in the future you're no longer conducting business there, is that box then removable and you would take it somewhere else, or someone would take it somewhere else?
You can, they're pretty easy to remove. I've seen other people buy them from stores going out of business, so.
Thank you.
We could take it with us if we chose.
I just had a question for Eric or Nick. So on the exhibit, the properties on the other side of the fences, they're residential?
Property, we're looking at A15?
Yeah. Sorry.
Here, my understanding, and this is what we believe, well, actually, I do have, I know. Here, this is commercial. This line here is actually the zoning line that differentiates the commercial up here from residential down here.
Okay, I see it.
Now, this is zone commercial. This is zoned here residential, but it's used for commercial purposes. Currently, this is a vacant lot, is my understanding. Is that right, Eric? Yeah, at this moment it is, yeah. In the front is the,
You can make the references on A4, so we can see what the vacant lot is, and then the residential property. You have a Google map, yep.
and there's one that I made larger.
Yeah,
That
one a little bit larger.
Yeah, it's one a little bit larger. That may be better able. Yeah, email. Brad, looking at A9. So here's the property. Right? Here's that area where the unit would be installed. Here's the parking lot to the rear, that's commercial. Here's another commercial property here. And then this is all commercial in this area. I guess it would probably go to about here. I would guess about here is the property line for that, even though it's the same ownership. And then here's the flower shop, the All Seasons Flower Shop. Here is the lot that is zoned residential, that is a vacant lot currently. It's zoned R5, actually. Everything back here is zoned R5. It's not in the Garrett Hill district. I did, I did make a copy of the Radnor zoning map. And unfortunately, when I took it to Kinko's, they couldn't colorize it. But 908. 908 is here. This lighter area is part of the Garrett Hill CR district. Back here, you'll see is R5, the darker area here. So 908 here, and you see where it bisects. This is that property I just referencing, and here's your district line. Up here is, I think it followed the property lines. That's how these were arrived at. So back here, these are the property lines for all these properties in the front.
So with the proposed new position, are you still asking for a setback variance? Do you need one?
We're not asking for any setback variances because we've complied with 5 feet on both sides, and we've also complied with
15 feet, yeah.
From the rear.
Okay. I don't have any other questions, Eric. Thank you. Nick, anything else?
That's all I have. Just the exhibits may be made part of the record, please.
Okay. Actually, I have a question for you, Nick. On the first point, the first piece of the ordinance talking about restriction against storage of equipment. Could you kind of elaborate on that, what your position is?
Yeah, our position on this is, one, is it really regulating what we're doing here? Or is it more for you can't display articles outside, as I mentioned, such as the flower store, which we received relief for. The second, if we do need a variance from that, you have a very narrow lot, you have a very narrow store, and the testimony is that due to business reasons, they need this unit and a larger unit, and as a result, they're requesting the storage of this unit outside. But again, I guess it's two issues. One, is it required? And two, if it is required, then we feel as if we've established the hardship for a variance.
Okay. That's all the questions I had. Any public comment? Please come up.
Absolutely. And state your full name and spell it. Luciano Di Felice. Okay. Yes. Luciano F like Frank, E-L-I-C-E. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Luciano Di Felice. I own the adjacent properties.
Not sure that that mic is on.
Oh, sorry, okay. Thank you. I own the adjacent properties to Zestos. One is residential and two are commercial. The property's been vacant, the commercial space, for the last 3 years or so. The residential was a house that I tore down last year and plan to have rebuilt. Hopefully this year, if not next year. My family's owned these properties for the last 4 decades. We've been a big contributor to the community. We own Garrett Hill Pizza for decades, and I plan on bringing it back this year. The residential space that's adjacent to this property already has a very confined buffer between the commercial and the residential. We're talking inches. The parking in and out in the residential space is already kind of a nuisance. Fine. You know, we get it. We're going to understand that when we build it, rebuild this house. But having a unit there that's running 24/7 is just going to add noise pollution. We don't want that. The next thing, which may be the biggest issue, is you're diminishing the parking that Zesto has. They have very limited parking spaces. They have 3 or 4 delivery guys a day, all day long, including, in addition to Zuber parking, Zuber Eats or DoorDash, which in the last 3-4 years, I've been a very nice guy and haven't did anything. I let them always have parked in front of Garrett Hill Pizza. I've never said anything and let them contribute. But this is a transition year. I plan on reopening Garrett Hill Pizza. It's my parking spaces. I want to use my parking spaces. I need my parking spaces. The last 3-4 years, he has flourished very well. I'm not jealous. I'm happy for him, okay? But the need for an additional unit is because he's doing very well and he's been using all my parking spaces. That's got to stop because we're going to reopen and we're going to need our spaces back again.
It's parking spaces in the spot where they're proposing to put the equipment?
No, but they only have maximum 2-3 parking spaces.
The spots you're talking about are out on Conestoga.
No, on his spaces. So he has 7 or 8 employees, sometimes 10 employees there, including 3-4 delivery guys. Where are these guys parking? Okay, the additional unit is only going to add to further business, which I'm totally fine for. Just don't let it impede on my property, which has been in the last 3-4 years, which I have been fine with. But now it's going to be an issue because I'm opening this year. So now it's going to be an issue. And for the last, few years, it really hasn't been an issue because I've never said anything. The next item is, I'm building this home. Who wants to have, refrigeration within inches of their property line, running 24/7? I don't want it. You want it? Nobody wants that. It's not allowed? No, I don't want it. If I allow this, you're permitting, when you allow so many parking spaces because someone has so many tables or whatever. Someone has so many tables or so many but this business is occupying multiple parking spaces more than are allowed. It's going to be an issue. It's already an issue today. When we open, it's going to be a bigger issue. What are we going to do then? It's too late to then backtrack.
I'm sorry, can I ask you a question? You're doing construction on your property now,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
When do you expect to complete that?
very good question, thank you. It's been taking long because it's been a lot of engineering work. It's a lot, and it's always the COVID excuses that keep on back and delaying everything. So we just got approval 2 months ago, a month and a half ago, whatever it was, from Kevin Kachansky and everything sorry, I apologize. We just got approved the full green light within about 40 days ago, 45 days ago, whatever it was. We've been doing engineering work, this and that. Between the holidays and that, it's taking us about 2 months to put it. We're putting in the permit any day. So we're allowed 40 seats, and we're going to have some delivery. Where's everybody going to park in Garrett Hill? Parking in Garrett Hill is already a problem. I don't know.
And I appreciate that, and I'm well familiar with that area, and it's tight now, and
Yeah.
We get that. Those issues aren't directly related to the question that's in front of the board now.
Yeah, so.
But I do understand that part of the issue is, as the evidence or the
Absolutely,
testimony
yeah.
reflects, is they need it because business
Right,
is
it's the
great.
missioning part, and it's going to become, we're missing the elephant in the room here, okay, which is parking. And I'm not going to, I know it's maybe rooting off the ultimate question here, but it's inches away. This unit's inches away from my house that I'm going to build. And I don't want it. I don't hear noise pollution. It's already enough noise pollution and noise, and not to mention all the rubbish that spills in over to my residential R5 space. I don't want that. Do you guys want that? No. Who wants all the 2 dumpsters? You would think, let me keep this place clean. No, it's never clean. All the rubbish is always spilling over to my residential property, all the time. Now, let's add a 20-foot unit air conditioning space. Is that going to really help? No. Yeah, I'm going to add a fence, but even when I had the fence there, which I took down only because it was old, and I got to put a new one up, and I will this year, but it's only going, the unit's only going to add to more trash in the community. Last thing is, mouth's very dry. It's pest control. We've been a long night. Pest control. Okay? We've had Garrett Hill Pizza there from 1980 to 2000s, in the early 2000s. We never had a call from Radnor Township about a pest issue. Never. Okay? Now, in the last 6 months, the building's been vacant for years. Years. And the house has been vacant for years too. But I get a call from Radnor Township in the last 6 months, 2 calls. Hey, we have a pest control problem. It may be from you, from me. There's nothing there. I have pest control service going there every quarter, putting in the pest service treatments. But this is my problem? There's no food. There's nothing there. There's no density. There's no population. There's nobody there. It's been like that for years. But Radnor Township calls me and says, hey, be careful, try to get pest control in there. Mr. Bruno. Okay, I do it. I have the service come in twice every quarter. Where is this pest control problem really rooting from, guys? Just think about that twice. Okay. So long, man.
Yeah, and it was already testified to, but Chris, Mr. Luciano mentioned noise. and I believe you testified as to where the compressor is going to be?
Yeah, the compressor will not be located outside on the unit. It'll be in our basement.
And just so we're clear, when we say refrigeration unit, this is an HVAC or AC unit, or is it to store food?
It's to store food, produce.
Okay. Okay, I don't have any other questions. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and just on the parking issue, Mr. DeFelice may not know, but I represented his dad 40 years ago when we got the relief. Oh, okay. It's not important. But we did get, Mr. DeFelice knows it, we got relief for parking probably 40 years ago when the Garrett Hill Pizza went in, which was a very fine establishment, and his dad was a wonderful person, so.
Understood, thank you.
Just real quick, Nick, do you want us to consider, you have it by right?
I think we may very well have it by right.
Would you like us to consider that?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So you would be up for either a variance or whatever, a determination, wrong word,
Right.
that it's not permanent storage, for
Correct.
example. Okay, thank you.
All right, can I hear a motion from the board? No further public comment, I assume. Okay, thank you. Motion from the board? Well, for discussion.
Yeah, I was going
Go
to say,
ahead.
to get discussion started, I would move that the board grant the relief that is requested in accordance with the testimony and plans that have been presented this evening. The relief being the variance from the requirement or the limitation on outside storage in the district.
I'll second.
I have a second. Board discussion, and again, the motion is on the assumption that we do need a variance. We're asking for a variance. It's not of right. That's the motion on the floor. Any discussion?
I mean, to me, again, I'm taking a look at the language of the code. Yeah, sorry. All right, I just have to get closer. I'm reading and doing the same thing. Looking at the code, and the fact says no permanent storage of merchandise, articles, or equipment shall be permitted outside a building. I think the rest is irrelevant to what we're looking at here. I mean, that's really what I'm looking at saying, you know, is first and foremost, is it permanent? I think we've had testimony that it is movable. And is it really storage of merchandise, articles, or equipment? I mean, it's certainly something that goes into something that would certainly be, you know, considered merchandise later on. So, not that I think that we have to file precedent ever, but certainly making a recommendation here to, I think you should be entitled to it. I'm saying, is it really a variance or is it just a by right issue? I think if it is, if we're going to make the variance argument, I'm certainly persuaded that it's now within the setback limits, and that I think even though it was briefly touched on in the testimony, if you attached it to the structure, you would have this by right. And I think the cost to actually attach it to the structure is somewhat the hardship. Because I'm assuming, even though it wasn't in testimony, I think we all could realize that that could be very, very expensive, especially with the Bilco doors beneath it. So I'm in favor of it. I'm wavering on if it's by right or by variance. But that's kind of where I am.
Any other comments?
Yeah, I don't think this is a by right issue. My sense is if the relief is granted, that storage will be there as long as the business is operated out of that space. The fact that after that business is done operating in that space, the storage may go away is irrelevant because the business isn't there, its merchandise won't be there, it won't be storing things there, it'll be done there. So I don't think this is a by right issue. And I'm, you know, I do think technically that the variance is needed for the proposed use. And when you start talking about the need for the variance, you start looking at hardship. I believe, and I'm showing my age here, there was a steak and pizza shop operated there under the name of Tony's 50 years ago. It has always been a successful location. It has always supported the operation of a business out of it. The question now is the only reasonable use of that property that would be supported by this storage something that expands the business? I don't know that there is a hardship there that prevents the applicant from using the space to run a successful business out of it. So in addition to seeing that a variance is needed, I'm not certain that the case has been made that a sufficient hardship to compel this board to grant the variance has been shown.
Any other comments? I'm looking at this ordinance, and, you know, in the first sentence, it doesn't say anything about, you know, merchandise, articles, equipment for sale. In the second sentence, it does. It talks about no goods, articles, equipment shall be offered for sale in the front yard setback. It seems to me the overall flavor of this, they're talking about something other than what we're dealing with. It sounds like they're talking about if you have things for sale, you can't store them permanently outside. That's kind of my reading of it. So I think there might be a by right argument here. So I'm gonna support the motion. So we'll call it a vote. All those in favor of the motion, which would approve the application based on a variance, John?
I'm voting against my own motion.
Brad? I am in favor. Rich?
In favor.
Jamie? And I am in favor, so the motion passes 3-2. Thank you very much. Yes. Our next meeting scheduled February 17th, 2022. Thanks, everyone, tonight. It was a long haul. We're adjourned.